right, guys, so we are looking at quadratic formula. So we've had factoring. Can everything be factored? No, unfortunately, not everything factors. Okay, then we looked at square root method. Can I use that for everything? What has to be missing to use a square root method? The bx has to be missing. All right, so neither of those options work for everything, right? They're great tools in my toolbox, but not on everything. So quadratic formula actually works on everything, which is really nice. It's going to work on every single problem. Now, the question being is, why don't we just do this and nothing else? Because it's long, it's tedious, right? Factoring's a lot faster, square root method's a lot faster. This is kind of my, I try to factor if I can, I try to use a square root method if I can, and then if I can't, I guess then I'll use this quadratic formula. Okay, I know it's going to work, but it's not the fastest. All right, so there is your quadratic formula. Do you think you have to memorize it? Yep. Yeah, of course you do. You got to memorize that. But to help you memorize, I like obnoxious ways to help you remember things. Yay, aren't you excited? All right, so how do we use the darn thing? So if you notice on his board, he had it in standard form, and then he had the formula underneath. So every time we start solving, we need to start by putting it in standard form. In other words, set it equal to 0. So rewriting this one, you're going to have x squared plus 3x. Move this over as minus 2 equals 0. So you want it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So then you can see where the a, b, and c are coming from in that formula, right? The a is the number with x squared, b is the number with x, and c is just the plain old number. All right, so what's your a value? I want a number, not a variable. 1. Yep, the number in front of that is just 1. Your b? And your c? -2. Yeah, whatever sign's in front is going to stay with that, okay? All right, then we're just going to plug things in. So x equals -b, it's going to be -3, plus or minus, and we have this giant radical, and underneath is b squared. Now, when you are plugging things in with an exponent, does it make a difference if there's parentheses around it or not? In other words, think back to if I had -5 squared or -5 in parentheses squared. Make a difference? Yeah, it does, big time. So rule of thumb, make sure you're safe. Always put that number in parentheses. Now, if it's a positive, it's not really a big deal. But if you get in the habit of not putting it in parentheses and you stick a negative in there, it's going to change your answer, okay? So put that number in parentheses every time. Then you have minus 4 times my a, which is 1, my c, which is -2, all over 2 times a, which is 1. No, it's just a positive. Get 2 times the a value. Now, if you do not have a calculator, grab one. There's nothing worse than you getting these wrong just because you type it in wrong. Okay? I will. Because it's an x squared, right? So I should always have 2. Now, in that last method, a lot of you kept forgetting the plus minus signs, right? You took the square root, your answer is plus minus. But here, it's part of your formula, so we shouldn't have to worry about forgetting it. All right, so guys, after you plug stuff in, right? So if we're kind of doing a step-by-step. So first step, you want to put in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Step 2 would be to just plug into the formula. Step 3 is to simplify under the radical. Now, when I say simplify under the radical, you're going to grab your calculator. You're going to type in what's under the radical. Do not type in the radical. Did you hear me? Do not type in the radical in the calculator. Because if it's not pretty, what's your calculator going to do with it? It's going to give you, what's the square root of 3? It's a decimal. Do I want decimals? No, I do not want decimals. I want exact answers. So go ahead and grab your calculator. We're going to type in just 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. Exactly what's underneath the radical. Do not type in the radical. And tell me what you get. So 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2 under the radical. Just don't type the radical in. But type in 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. And that's 17. Good. All right, so if you had typed that radical in, it would have given you like 4 point something, right? It would have given you a decimal for whatever the square root of 17 was. So don't type in the radical. If you need to make a note to yourself on your kind of step-by-step, do not type the radical in the calculator, okay? All right, after you do that, you will then attempt to factor tree the radical. So can I do a factor tree on 17? No, 17 is prime. Okay. So from there, you will then try to simplify the fraction. And make a note, it has to be all 3 numbers. The number one mistake people make is right there. And right now you're probably going, wait, all 3 numbers, what does that mean? Because right now you have a negative 3, you have a 2. Is there a number in front of this radical? There's a 1 right now. So when I say all 3 numbers, in order to simplify your fraction, you would have to do the negative 3, the 1, and the 2. Can you divide all of those by something? And no, I cannot. You cannot just simplify like 2 of these and not the other one, because that changes the value of your fraction. Because technically, when we're writing a big old fraction like this is equivalent to negative 3 over 2 plus or minus radical 17 over 2. Right? I can write that split because they're both getting divided by the 2. So if I'm going to simplify, if I would just do these 2 numbers, that would be changing the value that this one gets divided by, but not actually simplifying it top and bottom. So we actually can't. So it has to be all 3 numbers. Okay? So since all 3 numbers don't divide, I'll rewrite it just because I wrote all over that. Negative 3 plus or minus radical 17 over 2 is as far as I can get. Do I have 2 answers? I do. I have negative 3 plus radical 17 over 2, and I have negative 3 minus radical 17 over 2. They're not pretty answers, but they're there, right? Are those just regular numbers? Can I find that number on the number line? Yeah, it's a decimal, but yeah, I can. And if you're not sure, grab your calculator. So if I would type in negative 3 plus the square root of 17, and then take that answer and divide it by 2, 0.56155. So it's just a little over half. Okay? And then negative 3 minus the square root of 17 divided by 2. It's negative 3.56155. So just a little past negative 3.5. So they are just numbers. Okay? That is just an exact answer. All right, now I'm going to be very nitpicky on a few things, so don't lose easy points from me, okay? When you are writing this out, if your radical does not cover the entire thing of what's underneath there, wrong. That changes the value, okay? If your fraction bar does not cover everything under that radical and this number out in front, wrong. Changes the value, okay? That fraction being underneath that whole thing means everything up top gets divided by 2. So if I don't have that fraction, because I've seen people do that, where they go writing and their fraction bar stops there. That would imply only the number in the radical gets divided by the 2, which that's not accurate. I want that whole top number to be divided. Or I see people get lazy with their radical, and it stops like there. Well, that would be the square root of 3 squared minus 4. And then I would take that answer and times it by 1 and by negative 2. Okay, so make sure your radical is long enough and your fraction bar is long enough, or I'm going to take off points. Okay, I remember very vividly when I was in high school, getting knocked points for that very thing. I was going fast, writing it down, and I did not get my radical long enough. Changes the value in math. All right, let's try another one. X squared minus 2x plus 10 equals 2. All right, so first thing is put it in standard form. So x squared minus 2x, subtract the 2 over here. That gives me an 8 equals 0. So what's your a value? 1. Your b? Negative 2. And your c? My dog has this costume, by the way. The bumblebee. He's not a fan. He looks cute in it. All right. So once you put it in standard form, figure out my a, b, and c are, and then we can go ahead and plug it in right into the formula. So negative b, but my b is negative 2. Good. Make that a positive. So it's going to be a positive 2 plus or minus square root b squared. Make sure it's in parentheses or it's going to be wrong. So negative 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, c, which is 8, all over 2 times my a, which is 1. All right, what am I going to do next? Good. Simplify under the radicals. Grab calculator. You're going to type in negative 2 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 1 times 8. Do not type the radical in your calculator. So we get 2 plus or minus radical. That's what I got. Negative 28 over 2. If you type that in your calculator with the radical, what would your calculator tell you? Would it give you a decimal? Why would your calculator not like that? It's a negative. Your calculator does not like imaginary numbers. All right, from here, let's go ahead. Can I factor tree this? I know an I comes out, right? So let me go ahead and pull the I out. Can I do a factor tree? It's 2 and 14, 2 and 7. So I do have a pair of 2's that can come out. So I have 2 plus or minus 2i radical 7. That's my leftover. All over 2. All right, what do I do next? Can I divide all 3 numbers? Yes. All 3 numbers being divided, I can divide them all by 2. Can I ever divide the number under the radical? No. The only way that number under the radical changes is if me doing factor trees, right? And I can pull out pairs. That's the only way that number changes. You cannot ever divide into that. All right. Now, here's where a lot of mistakes happen. What do you get when you divide everything by 2? Do I have to write all 3 of those ones? Do I have to write any of them? I need to write one of them. Somebody said it. The one in front of the plus or minus. 1 plus or minus I radical 7. And let's talk about why, because that is probably the most missed, because people are like, oh yeah, they're all 1, so I don't have to write any of them. They just write plus minus I radical 7, right? They don't put any of the other ones. Is this one implied, the one with the I? Yeah, there's no number, we assume it's a 1, right? How about dividing by 1? Is it implied? If I divide by 1, does it change anything? No. This one was a multiplied 1. If I multiply by 1, does it change anything? What about this one? It's being added and subtracted. If you add 1 or subtract 1, does it change anything? Yes. So that first one is not an implied 1, right? Don't tell me it is, because then on every answer that you write for me that's plus minus whatever, I'm going to be like, is there a 1 in front of that? There's not. We don't imply that we're adding 1 to something. You can imply a multiply because it doesn't change it. You can imply a divide because it doesn't change it. We don't imply adding or subtracting. All right, x squared plus 6x plus 9. My dog has that costume as well. I made that one. I took an old teddy bear and used its body, and then I did the top. I sewed it together. He really didn't like that one because if he walked around like the body was in front of him as heavy, he didn't like it. All right, it's already in standard form. What's your A? What's your B? And your C? Good. So we're going to plug it into the formula. X equals negative B. It's going to be negative 6 plus or minus square root B squared, so 6 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 1, B, which is 6, oops, sorry, not B, AC, 9, sorry, all over 2 times A, which is 1. This is where you grab your calculator, you type in what's under the radical. Do not type the radical in. And what do we get? Everybody goes, I typed something in wrong, right? So what'd you get? You get 0. Is 0 a number? Is that okay? Yeah, okay, 0 is a number. It's fine. 0 over 2. All right, then I try to factor tree or simplify that radical. What's the square root of 0? 0. So do I need it? No. So I have x equals negative 6 over 2, which is, we're going to talk about that. That's just negative 3. And you're like, wait a minute, how many answers am I supposed to have? I should have 2. All right, so back to, did I get rid of the plus or minus? Square root of 0 is just 0, right? So let's kind of think of it that way. If I left it there, what's negative 6 plus 0? It's negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. Okay, how about what's negative 6 minus 0? It's negative 6 divided by 2. It's negative 3. So do I really have 2 answers? They're just the same. They're both negative 3. Now, one thing I want you guys to start to recognize, if you get a nice, pretty answer, right, there's no radical, there's no I, nothing like that, what do you think that means about the original problem? How else could I have solved that? Can I use the square root method? No, I can't use the square root method. I can factor that. Let's look at this answer factored. It's already set equal to 0. You'd set up your parentheses. Last one's positive. 2 plus, 2 minus? 2 plus. Options for A, x and x. Options for C, 1 and 9 or 3 and 3? It's 3 and 3. So if I solved both of these, what would I get? I'd get negative 3. Right? If you did x plus 3 equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, you're going to get x equals negative 3 twice. So my 2 answers are negative 3. Now, look at the quadratic formula and all the work I did. Look at my factoring. Which method would you rather do? I'd rather factor. It's faster. So if I'm thinking about, I have my toolbox, here's what I need to do, what's the best tool? The best tool is factoring because it's the fastest. But can you use a screwdriver to put in a nail? Yeah, not the best choice, but it'll work. It takes a little longer. Same thing. It'll work. It just took a little longer. Okay? So anytime you get through the quadratic formula and you get a nice answer with no radical, no I, that's when you're like groan at yourself a little bit because you're like, I could have just factored that. Okay? So when that happens, you could have factored your answer. All right, 5x squared plus 8x equals negative 5. So we need to first set it equal to 0. So 5x squared plus 8x plus 5 equals 0. Moving that over. What's your A? Your B? Your C? All right. So let's plug it in. X equals negative b, it's negative 8, plus or minus square root b squared, it's going to be 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 5, c, which is 5, all over 2 times a, which is 5. Grab your calculator. Some of you are just sitting there like bumps on a log right now, waiting for everyone else to do all your work. I'm going to tell you right now, those of you who are not practicing this will be the ones that miss this. Seems silly that I'm asking you to type things in a calculator. But guys, I've been doing this for what, 16 years? I know what mistakes you're going to make. All right, what do we get underneath there? Negative what? 36. All over 10. All right, once you clean up underneath there, your next thing should be what? Try to factor tree that or simplify it. Do you guys see the negative under there? What's that going to give me? Give me an I. What's the square root of 36? 6. So negative 8 plus or minus 6i over 10. And then I have to ask myself, can I divide all three numbers? Has to be all three. Yeah, I can divide them all by 2. So negative 4 plus or minus 3i over 5. And since I have an I in there, that makes them not like terms, so I can't actually go any further than that. You doing okay? All right, why don't you guys try the next one on your own? The creepy Michael Jackson dog. All right, so this one was already in standard form. So your A was 1, your B is 4, your C is negative 3. If you lost that negative sign, your answer changes greatly. Okay, so just got to be careful. All right, so plugging things in, x equals negative b, it's negative 4, plus or minus square root, be 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 3, all over 2 times 1. From there, you'd want to simplify underneath your radical. So that would be, is that 28? All over 2. Factor tree on here, it's going to be 2 and 14, 2 and 7. So we get a pair of 2's that will come out. So negative 4 plus or minus 2 radical 7, all over 2. And then we look to see if we can simplify, and it has to be all three numbers. Never divide into a radical, okay? But all three numbers, and all three numbers I can actually divide by 2. So we're going to get x equals negative 2 plus or minus radical 7 over 1, but I don't have to write divide by 1. It's kind of implied. So there we go. Negative 2 plus or minus radical 7. Are you doing okay? If you missed it, do you see why? I know a couple of you had lost some signs in there. All right. Negative x squared minus 12 equals 4x. So I need to write that in standard form. What's going to be my best option here? I'm going to move the x squared and the 12. Because what happens when I move them? Positive. Yeah, positives are going to be a lot easier. More negatives I can kind of word away from, the better. You could divide everything by negative 1. Honestly, you could leave it negative, because then your a value would just be negative 1. So, I mean, you can leave them. Just my own personal thing is get rid of as many of those extra signs as possible. Oh, see, I like to move wherever keeps my x squared positive. Honestly, it doesn't matter. You can go either way. It really doesn't matter. So it'd be a positive x squared. We have a positive 4x, and that would make that a positive 12. The way I see it, if I don't have to show my work, like if you're okay to move things without writing it like that work down, I'm still rewriting the problem regardless, so does it really matter which ones I move? See, I'm a lazy mathematician, but I'm practical. All right, so my A value is 1, my B is 4, and my C is 12. Plugging things in. X equals negative B, so make that negative 4, plus or minus square root B squared, 4 squared, minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A. All right, let's clean up under the radical. So 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12. Is that negative 32? It's Monday morning. I don't always, I'm not always okay with my mental math this early. All right, what do you notice right away? What can I do with that? Take out that negative, right? There's going to be an I. You can do a factor tree on the 32. 2 and 16, 2 and 8, 2 and 4, 2 and 2. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus pair of 2's, which makes 4. So 4i, and I have a leftover 2 all over 2. Can you divide all 3 numbers? Yes. No, yes, no, yes, I don't know. When I say all 3, these are the ones I'm talking about. Because am I ever allowed to divide in the radical? No, do not ever. Somebody in here is going to divide into that radical and you're going to make me mad. Do not divide into that radical. Okay? But I can divide all of my numbers by 2. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus 2i radical 2 all over 1, which I don't really have to write. If you write the all over 1 because you're just like, I don't remember which one I can get rid of and which one I can't, and I want to be safe, I'm not going to count you wrong. I'm just lazy and don't want to write it. How are we feeling? You guys are sometimes hard to read. Are we okay? No? No? All right, at least somebody is. Another bumblebee, bulldog. Ain't he cute? Come on, you got to admit he's adorable. All right, what do I do first? Standard form. So let's move that 15. So 4x squared plus 7x minus 15 equals 0. All right, so that means my A is 4, my B is 7, my C is negative 15. Don't lose that negative sign. So we get negative B, which is negative 7, plus or minus square root B squared, 7 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 4, C, which is negative 15, all over 2 times A, which is 4. Stop real quick. Did your radical cover everything that it was supposed to? Does your fraction bar cover everything, even underneath that negative 7? Don't tell me it went underneath that x, though. Don't put it under the x. I see that all the time, too. All right, just making sure we're good. All right, so let's clean up underneath there first. Do not type in that radical. So 7 squared minus 4 times negative 15 is 289. That is a big one. Can I simplify the 289? What's the square root of 289? Yeah, that one's perfect. So x equals negative 7 plus or minus, you said 17, all over 8. Now, I have students all the time who put a radical back over that 17. That's for using toilet paper. right? I use the radical on the 289 to make it 17. Do I stop? Is that good? Circle my answer, call it good? Those are like terms. You see there's no I, there's no radical. Guys, if there's no I, no radical, just like with the other method, we have to keep going. So here we go. We kind of just do one at a time here. What is negative 7 plus 17? That is 10 over 8, which would simplify 5/4. Okay, and let's do the top again with the minus sign. What's negative 7 minus 17? Over 8, which is negative 3. I got two nice answers. I mean, it's a fraction. But if you get two nice answers, what's that mean about that problem? You could have factored it. Yeah. And we'll talk more about that later this week. Because the last page of your test is 6 problems. And I tell you, you can use any method you want, but you have to use each method twice. So you have to be able to recognize which ones factor and which ones don't. So we'll talk more about that later this week, but this kind of leads you to that. What happened in this problem that made it so that there was no I and no radical? I had a perfect square. Yep. That's called a discriminant. A little vocab for you. That number under the radical is called a discriminant. But we'll talk about that later this week. All right, we got 2 to go, right? 2 to go? Little minion dog. Ain't he cute? All right, go ahead and do minion dog on your own. Minion dog. He's got little boots on. All right, guys. Let's see how we did. How many of you just moved the 3 over? Did any of you? I think Grace did. Everyone else moved everything to the other side to make it positive? Which is totally fine. You still can. It doesn't matter. That's why I figured you probably did. Whatever, honestly, in these, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. So if I move that over, though, we're going to have a positive 8x squared, positive 18x, and then a positive 3. So like when Grace saw hers, all 3 were negative. So if they're all negative and ours are all positive, dividing by -1 just changes it back, so it doesn't really matter. All right, so my A was 8, my B was 18, my C is 3. So plugging into our formula, we get negative B, which is negative 18, plus or minus square root, would be 18 squared minus 4 times 8 times 3, all over 2 times 8. So cleaning up underneath there, was it 228 over 16? Factor tree here, 2 and 114, 2 and 57. Is that 3 and 19? My mental math is a little shaky this morning. All right, so then we get x equals negative 18 plus or minus. I got a pair of 2's that can come out. Left over 3 and 19, so left over 57, all over 16. All 3 numbers. Can I divide all of them by something? Yes, I can divide them all by 2. So dividing them all by 2, we get negative 9 plus or minus radical 57 over 8. So this problem, could I have factored it from the start? If that's the kind of answer I get, would I have been able to factor this? No. I got an ugly radical. We never factor and get a radical for an answer, right? All right. Last one? Are you good? No? Yes? She had a calculator error. It's okay. It happens. Okay. Last one, little jail dog. Oh, that's a pretty problem to start with. So when I put that in standard form, what do we get? Oh, that's like a bad omen, isn't it? So my A is 6. My b is, oh wait, that should be a positive, shouldn't it? Yeah, add 7x. Yeah, it's a positive. That's a positive 6, and that's a positive 6. All right, if we get an answer of 13, I'm going to, like, be done. Okay, we're just going to leave. We're going to call it a day. All right, so here we go. So x equals negative b, so negative 6 plus or minus square root. Well, we know what we're plugging in, right? So 6 squared minus 4 times 6 times 6 all over 2 times 6. All right, so let's go ahead and check out what do we get underneath that radical. Negative what? 108, thank you. All over 12. All right, and notice there's a negative, so I'm going to go ahead and pull out the I so I don't lose that. We can do a factor tree. So 2 and 54, 2 and 27, good, and then 3 and 3. So negative 6 plus or minus, what comes out of all that? Good. You have pair of 2s, pair of 3s, which makes 6. Don't lose the I you already took out. Left over 3, all over 12. And then all 3 numbers. Can I divide all 3 numbers by something? 6. Should I divide under the radical? No, never. I'm going to end up with 2 1s on the top. Which one do I need? Good, I need that negative 1 first. Negative 1 plus or minus, do I need that one? Nope. I radical 3 all over 2. So, quadratic formula works on all quadratics, right? I can solve anything with it. Is that your go-to? I would hope not. And every year I have a couple kids, after I had this chapter, they go to that every single time. I guess if you want to. It's not the fastest. All right, this chapter, again, your test will be broken down like solve with factoring, solve with square root, solve with quadratic formula, and then a page of solve, use each method twice. Okay, so after this chapter, we will still be solving things. So after this chapter, then you can kind of pick. If you get down to a quadratic that you need to solve, whatever method floats your boat, right? Whatever one's your favorite. All right, questions on anything?